morning that I wanted to share with you, and hopefully it gives somebody out there some inspiration, and maybe you just need to hear Robbins. And Russell's got his book Expert Secrets coming out, which is already out actually, which looks amazing, which I'll be getting a copy of. But Tony interviewed him, and there was a part of that interview, if you haven't checked it out, just go online and Google it, you'll find it pretty quick. And Tony asked Russell what the biggest misconception in marketing is, and if a business could take sort of one tip, what would he recommend to turn that around? And his answer actually really surprised me and triggered something within me that was a significant insight. And he said that most of us go out there if we're in business or we're in a job or career and try to sell the feature and sometimes the benefits, which is all pretty common knowledge in the marketplace these days. But one thing he said was most of us don't tap into the vulnerability to connect, because we all know people by an emotion, not logic. And I sat there watching this video and actually just started crying and realised that the significant insight that I just gained was I'd been slowly but surely over sort of the last few weeks disconnecting from myself and distancing myself from those that I love most, including my beautiful partner and my family, and just questioning and doubting who I was as a man. And maybe this is a message for the men out there and about vulnerability, and whether it's in a business sense and you want to, relate a message to the marketplace or to your customer base, or if it's just in your sort of close relationships. When I learned that lesson, and it was reiterated today through that significant insight, that vulnerability is such a power, it changes the game. And I think back to when I first learnt this, it was way back 2010 at my first Tony Robbins event actually, and I remember just sitting there and he was doing his thing, inspiring, motivating, and just bamboozling you with what he has to offer and the value that he provides. And he was standing there, and he was only a few feet away from me, and I was looking up at him, and he was speaking about his beautiful wife Sage, and the vulnerability that he showed in that moment. I knew what was going through. Every woman in that room wanted to be with Tony, and every man wanted to be Tony. And it was because of the emotion that he relayed and the vulnerability. And in that moment, the belief that I'd had that vulnerability was weakness shifted. The meaning in my nervous system changed, and it became a strength. And from that day forward, I've slowly but surely chipped away at the masks and the shells that I've worn as a person growing up, and slowly but surely chipped away at that vulnerability piece and got more vulnerable. But over the last few weeks and months, as I shared, I slowly started putting back up those walls, and really understood that it wasn't just hurting those that I love most, but myself, because I was losing who I was. And watching that video this morning, and Russell relating that to Tony and giving his sort of take on vulnerability and how it's such a strength. And he told a story actually of a chiropractor who was struggling to bring in, grow his business and bring in sales, and he worked with him and helped him understand that, asked him, why'd you get into chiropractic? And he told him that story, and it was really powerful and vulnerable. And then he put that on video and got it out there to people, because I think if you're watching this, we all connect through vulnerability. And it was a awakening for me that when you disconnect from yourself, you're not only hurting yourself, but those that you love most. And if you're lucky enough to run a business or serve a mission or have a great career, then if you can tap into that from a place of authenticity, not showmanship and putting on vulnerability, but getting at the core of it and the heart of it, and being able to tell that story, it's going to inspire people, it's going to motivate people, and it's why we're all here, right, to love and be loved. So that was my significant insight, and hopefully sort of helped you in some way. And to the men out there, stop being pussies about vulnerability. It's no longer a weakness. And I grew up with a stepdad who was hard as nuts, and his dad was even harder, and no sign of weakness. And I didn't shed a tear. I made a decision when I was in grade 5, I think you're about 12 then, that I'm no longer going to cry, that it was making me weak. And for 10 to 15 years after that, I didn't shed one tear. And I can openly discuss that now, but in years past, there's no way I'd want to show that vulnerability, because that would make me weak, rather than framing it as a real strength. And Brené Brown talks a lot about the power of vulnerability, and yeah, that's what I got to share about my significant insight from this morning. And thanks to Janet and Neal and Kiko, who's jumped on, and appreciate your support here. And if you want a bit more of a hand to the men out there, I guess I'm talking to you now. It's you're only hurting yourself if you're not being as vulnerable as you possibly can be. And I'm not talking about crying on every street corner and crying at the Monopoly game that you lost, even though I did as a kid probably. I'm talking about showing some real emotion, being able to support your woman's emotions, and when you fuck up and you fall down, get back up and go again, and not putting on this facade that you've got to be this this egotistical strong man that never sheds a tear or is never vulnerable, but quite the opposite. That, hey, you're human doing your best, and you're going to be that rock, and part of being that rock is showing some emotion. So I'm still a work in progress, and by no means do I have all the answers, but I'm honoured and privileged to be able to coach upon some of this stuff in this day and age, and just share some of my lessons. And I got a big shove this morning, and I wanted to share that, and hopefully this message serves and supports you in some way. If it has, reach out to me, comment below, and I look forward to connecting. And if you want to find out more about what Ness and I are up to, head over to timandness.com.au/join revolution. We share the best tips, tools, training, strategies, all about creating an extraordinary life and stepping more and more into your potential, unlocking your genius, and just having high levels of clarity and progress as well in your life and progressing. So I hope this served. If you want any extra help, just make sure you PM me. I'm always here to help. And wherever you're watching, thanks again, and bye till next time.